My name is Kirsten Bayer, and I'm with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University. And I will be on for technical support and helping moderation for today's performance office hours. We are recording today, so if you need to reference back to the recording or if you need to send it out to a colleague who could be here today, you will have the accessibility to do that. Speaking of accessibility, we also have closed captions on for your accessibility or note-taking purposes. If you would like to turn those on, you can simply click the CC on your Zoom toolbar. We are on Zoom meeting, so you do have the ability to unmute and mute yourself, but we just ask that you type any questions in the chat for the presentation until the end when we pause for questions, and then you can feel free to unmute and ask those live. And we will be sending this out via email, a follow-up email. We'll send out the recording and the slides from today to everyone following today's office hours session. And then I'm going to put the slides for today in the chat momentarily. Just give me a couple seconds here. I'll put them in the chat and then you can all download them if you need access to follow along for today. And before we get started with Mark and Paula, I'm just going to do some beginning polls that we like to have for analytical purposes. So the first poll is, what is your role in the WIOA system? So if you could go ahead and answer that. And I'll go ahead and drop those slides into the chat. So those slides for the slides for today are in the chat now. And we'll give everyone a couple more seconds to answer this poll. We only have about 3/4 of you who have answered, so we'll give that last fourth a couple more seconds. Okay, so some people are still answering, but I'll go ahead. I'll close it out. It's starting to slow down here. So looks like we have a lot of local board staff, Title I directors, Title I system administrators, Title I career planners, and then a couple other WIOA partners or stakeholders as well. So thank you. And then the next poll that we would just like to know is where your local area is from today, or where you're from, your local area that you're from today, excuse me. So we'll go ahead and give everyone a couple seconds for that poll. And then one other housekeeping thing I forgot to mention is that we will send this out, the recording and the slides, with a follow-up email, but we will also have it posted on our website, which is the Illinois Workforce Academy website. So if you ever watched one of our Workforce Wednesday webinars, we also have those housed on the same website. You'll have the URL in your follow-up email tomorrow, though. And then we also will have them posted on Illinois WorkNet as well. So you can locate this recording either way. Okay, I'll go ahead and end that. Looks like a lot of people from Central Illinois, Northern, and Chicago, and a couple of people sprinkled from down south. So thank you everyone for participating in those polls. We appreciate it. And I will hand it off to Mark Burgess to get us started.
Great. Thank you, Kirsten, and thank everyone for joining us today. We've got a nice big crowd, so glad we readjusted our schedule to meet some of your needs as well. We had a conflict back in February. Normally we would have done our quarterly office hours back then, so appreciate that everyone found time in their schedules in March to join us. Go ahead and go to that next slide, Paula. I'm going to provide just some general updates around performance and reporting. And the first one, I think everyone's heard at this point in time that we're going to be replacing IWDS. It's pretty old at this stage of the game for technology. Many of you have been through the transition when we had the prior system into IWDS. So all of you will be involved in this at some level or another, or most of you at least. Some of you have already been involved. All I can do is give you just a little bit of update. We've got a lot more going on, and we have some communication being developed to share with all of you. So be looking forward to that. But kind of in a nutshell, we are replacing iWids with a newer system. It's really modern technology. It's going to be more intuitive. It's going to be more user friendly. The career planners, I think, are going to be very happy about the abilities they'll have in this new system. We're going through a discovery process with all of our partners and staff with Illinois WorkNet and ensuring that they understand the needs of the system. And that's why some of you at the local area have been called upon to be part of this discovery endeavor phase of it. We want to make sure they see and hear from all of you as to what some of your needs are, as well as what we know WIOA requires. We need to do this because currently we have some issues within IWDS, so we've not been able to update. The technology doesn't allow. Staffing sometimes have been unable to update appropriately, so we're not necessarily always meeting the guidance that we have before us. So with this new system, our attempt and hope is that we will be able to meet all of our reporting guidelines, be timely, accurate, transparent, with everything that we report to Department of Labor. We will want to make sure that we assure accessibility in that system, which we've been working now with all of our systems for quite a while now. So I think that'll be an easy one to achieve. Many of you, if you're working with some of our other programs, such as the Youth Career Pathways, are going to be seeing something very familiar when you see 2.0. Some of the basis of our 2.0 developments have already been incorporated in those other programs that use Illinois WorkNet as their record keeping and reporting system. We expect that and hope that we'll have this complete sometime in late 2025. So we've probably got another 16 to 18 months of development. So hang in there. It's not going to happen overnight, but be assured that there's a lot of work going on in the background, a lot of meetings occurring on a so that when we roll it out, it's ready to go. We'll have many other phases throughout those next coming months. So look forward to working with all of you as we continue through that journey. The next couple slides, 3 slides, are really just to inform you that WIOA, has been around now for about a decade. And so the Congress has looked at that and seen some issues with the act, and so they're looking into replacing it with a new act. Should be the next slide. Maybe I didn't get those turned around there, Paula. Sorry, everyone. So Congress has this. It's not a proposal yet. They're just looking at this, but we wanted to share some of the items they're discussing in committee around performance and reporting. The act, if passed as they're writing it, would be called a Stronger Workforce for America Act. Again, it's only in committee at this time, but there are a lot of performance and reporting implications. Specifically, there are some new terms and definitions that we'll want to be mindful of when we see that. And this information, these next 3 slides, came from a side-by-side comparison that the National Skills Coalition put together. So I've just pulled some of the information from it. It's many pages long with all of these sections of WIOA compared to the new discussions around what I'm calling ASWA. And there are many others. If you do a Google search or internet search of this act, you'll find many other sources of information, including what Congress has out there and available to see. We are seeing very minimal changes to eligibility at this time. In fact, I don't even think the side-by-side mentions eligibility, so it must be very minimal in that sense. Again, we'll wait to see if this progresses further, what more they might add to that. They're going to be and they're already looking, actually, I should say, under WIOA, looking at fiscal expenditures. We're getting reports from Department of Labor regularly on TAA and WIOA expenditures. So this has become a hot topic for them. And so under this new act, they would be looking at expenditures. They would be looking at ITAs and training contracts and separately at supportive services to see how much is being spent on each of these types of services. So we'll have to make sure that we make it available. The system, I should say, is available to document accordingly whatever those guidelines present. This will be a little bit new for both state and local areas as far as performance outcomes. You know, we currently at the state level are held to a 50% threshold for each individual indicator. You are held to a 70%. And that 70%, as many of you know, is to ensure that the state can meet its goal. And so we bump that up just a little bit for all of you. But under the new act, they specifically outline that both states and local performance will be set at 80% thresholds of the negotiated, and I shouldn't say negotiated, I'm sorry, of the adjusted outcomes. And then the 90% for both the overall local or state program scores and overall local or state indicator scores. And those of you that are directly involved in performance will understand how those are calculated. We've not yet implemented those for WIOA, but those should be seen when you get and we move into the 2024 program year. We are not doing those for 22 or 23 at this time. And then it talks about reduction in funding, and this is at the local level as well, where if you are unsuccessful in the same measure for 2 consecutive years, you could lose up to 5% of your funding. Right now, there is no sanction such as that in our policies for local boards. So we'll have to keep that in mind and be mindful of that as we follow this through the process. Next slide there, Paula. Or go back to that first one if you would. Yeah. Okay. So we all know and hear about the statistical adjustment model. In this new development, they're talking about utilizing the SAM, at least for the state, as their negotiating side of the discussion. So when we meet with the region, the negotiation tool that we are sent, the SAM that develops that tool, would create the negotiated rate for us, and we would have to basically negotiate against that if we did not want to accept it. Right now, that's a tool to be used as we prepare for our negotiations versus the fact that it would be a tool that sets the goal unless we can otherwise show information and data that supports a different goal. So it'll be a little different way of going about getting our negotiations. There will be some new measures that we'll have to talk about, some revised measures. The fourth quarter employment rate would not be just simply employment, but it would be a comparison against the second quarter. The second quarter individuals, those in that pool of participants, are they still employed in the fourth quarter? So, you know, as we know now, someone could not be employed in the second quarter and then employed in the fourth quarter. That would be considered a success in the numerator. So this is a different way of looking at it and looking at it from a retention standpoint, not necessarily with the same employer, but from a workforce perspective. It's looking at reducing the amount of time to achieve a credential, employment goals and MSGs. I think they're looking at 6 months versus longer in some cases. So again, we'll keep an eye on that. It adds a new measure called median earnings gain. So it would be looking at that second quarter median earnings, which we look at now, but it would compare it to the 2 quarters prior to enrollment and to see what the gain is from the employment they had previously to the employment someone gains after they go through our program. So it's just showing what the return on investment in my mind is for the program. And then even though we just got a new effectiveness in serving employers, final register, final rule that we'll be implementing for 2023, it would be revising that and leaning heavily on work-based training models as a measure for the effectiveness in serving employers. And then adds an indicator for participants of work experience. See methodology, what it is, it costs a percentage of participants that utilize work experience. My view on it, and from regional representatives at WIOA, often work experience is very helpful for our participants to use maybe more. It actually talked about this later in the presentation. A helpful tool to get MSG some individuals who maybe are enrolled over time. Sorry about that. So anyway, it looks like DOL is wanting to push work experience as another service that should be maybe utilized a little more often than normally we are currently. Next slide there, Paula. All right, final thing, because this is also in our shop, along with Laura Dom, who's joined us today. We oversee the eligible training provider programs. And so there are a lot, and this is just a very minimal part of what we see. There's several pages in this comparison on eligible training providers, but I thought I'd highlight just a few of them. There's 2 tiers. So it's almost like there's a 4-tier system in my mind, because there's 2 tiers of eligibility, standard and conditional, plus the initial and conditional eligibility remain. So again, without seeing the definitions for those and seeing the underlying requirements for those, it's hard to really see what they're trying to propose there. But again, we'll keep an eye on that. There will be minimum performance set that we have to set for providers. Right now, we can set it. Under the new act, we must set it. And so we'll keep working to make sure we can capture that from all of our providers and all of their programs. And I think we'll be in good shape if this were to pass through anyway, because we know we're in a phase right now of trying to make sure we can capture all of the performance, especially those other students that aren't WIOA participants that might be in a program. There's talk about what kind of performance we'd be looking at, and it's very similar to what the WIOA now and or the new proposals might be as far as credentials, median earnings, and that ratio of median earnings. They extend the conditional eligibility period to 4 years from 2 years, so that might be good from a management standpoint, administrative standpoint, not having to come back every 2 years. My guess is there'll be some criteria on what is needed to extend it out to 4 years, and not everyone would necessarily get a 4-year conditional eligibility period. They talk about payments on this, and what that means is kind of interesting. That payment would not be made. There's 4 levels, so 25% of payment of the program would come in enrollment, 25% upon completion, 25% upon employment, and then I'm drawing a little bit of a blank on what the other 25% is. But anyway, that'll be interesting to see how that plays out as far as how payment would be made. Again, all these are proposal. We have nothing more than what you might be able to find on the internet, so I can't really expand anything more than what I'm providing here. We will be presenting a webinar in the future. I don't even have a timeline on that, whether that'll be in the next few weeks or a few months. We probably have to gather more information before we can do it, but look for an announcement in those weekly workforce professional emails for when we might actually present a webinar on this new act. And then before I turn it over to Paula, just a few more notes of what's been occurring in workforce. The National Apprenticeship System Enhancements is a proposed new rule. The IWIB's Apprenticeship Committee created a task force that included businesses, board members from the committee. I joined that from an OAT and performance standpoint and reporting standpoint. A majority of what we provided comments on was related to, there's a lot of requirements put on employers and sponsors of apprenticeships. that might be excessive in some of our business members' minds. So there was a lot of comments sent to that. There really wasn't much in this new proposal around performance or reporting, so I didn't have a whole lot to report back to that task force as far as comments. But you know, those have been received by departments of labor and education, and they're looking at everyone's comments, not just ours, but across the nation. So it'll be interesting to see if what comes out of a final rule whenever it's issued. If you've got any questions on that, I would try to reach out to the board's apprenticeship committee and ask them, because there were many of their members involved in this development. As you all know, we are in a new cycle of performance negotiations. So in April or May, we're still waiting to set our date. We'll be negotiating with Department of Labor's Region 5 for our state goals. We've submitted our expected levels to DOL and the Unified State Plan, and it is under review. We're waiting approval. We'll be doing your negotiations sometime in August or September. We hope to start those maybe the third week of August and carry those through the end of September. We'll be revising policy and guidance on this. And finally, we'll be issuing a local negotiation tool for all of you to see what the predictions are from your historical outcomes and data. Andy Blanks joined us today. He and Brian Richard from Northern Illinois University, who are doing all the great work around our SAM, are also working on this tool. They're going to be presenting a webinar at the WIOA Summit. So if you're interested in hearing that, please register for the summit and join his sessions. I think that's on the second day. I'm not sure if I've seen a final agenda, but look for when that is and try to join if you've got some interest in hearing about this negotiation tool. We'll need to be issuing it prior to negotiations, obviously. So we're thinking we'll have this done by the end of June, early July, get that to all of you, so that you have a little bit of time to review it. We'll do a webinar on it probably at that time as well, whether that's fully on the tool or kind of the negotiation process as a whole. But we will have a webinar sometime in July to go over the negotiation process. And then you can utilize that as you prepare to submit to us your expected levels of performance that kick off kind of the negotiation cycle. Once we receive those is when we'll schedule you for a negotiation call. So just be looking for all of that. And then final, before I turn it to Paula, is please register for the summit. I'm sure all of you are getting those notification emails from the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support each Monday or each week. So we look forward to seeing you at the summit April 24th and 25th. I didn't see any questions in chat on this. Like I said, for the most part of what I've presented, it's all future work, so don't have a whole lot more information. Again, if you're wanting to see more about the new act potential, I'd do a Google search and look for Congress's document, National Skills Coalition. Any number of organizations are now putting kind of some of their thoughts on paper. I'll turn it over to Paula now, who's going to provide you some updates and new information around some of the performance measures that you're held to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. My mouse is acting odd on me if you saw me zooming around on Mark's PowerPoint, but thank you very much, and hello, everyone. Today, I'm going to cover the measurable skills gain measure and a little bit on credentials. I'll be moving pretty quickly. This isn't necessarily intended to be a full-blown technical assistance on MSG and credentials. The goal of today is to refresh, provide some key factors for determining MSGs based on guidance, and then to give you some updates that have been given to us by our Department of Labor Region 5 representative. So that is the point of today. But as most of us are familiar, I can't see all the participants right now, but measurable skills gains are measurable academic, technical, occupational, or other forms of progress being the key and they're towards industry recognized post-secondary credentials or employment. Not all credentials though. And there are 5 types of MSGs. Who's included in your measurable skills gain indicators in your programs? Adults, only certain adults, and it's all of those who are in education or training. They count in MSGs, and it includes your apprenticeships, which is training, but also your OJTs and customized training enrollments. For youth, all of your in-school youth are included in your measurable skills gain no matter what. And all of your out-of-school youth who are enrolled in secondary or post-secondary education while in the program, there's a few other qualifying youth elements or services, and those are found in the matrix. So in a nutshell, the measure calculation, the methodology is your percentage of program participants who during one single program year are in training that leads to post-secondary credential or employment, and then they're achieving measurable skills gains. So that's the calculation. Every year, there can only be one gain that we report. So you're not going to see 100 MSGs reported if it's not actual. One per person who's qualified in the measure every program year. Okay, so wherever you see these please notes are it's where we're providing information that we just want to refresh everyone on processes, procedures, and rules about MSG. So like I said, even though one gain can only be counted in the numerator per reporting period to come up with your MSG rate or percentage, DOL's guidance, again, was to remind us that staff really should be regularly checking for any skill gain attained throughout the program year. Even though if you have the minimal that you need for the measure, staff should be, LWIAs and programs should probably have in place procedures for regular checks. Even if it's quarterly, they understand you're not going to be able to document an MSG every time you talk to the person and can document one, but it's a very reasonable process or procedure to make sure you're getting credit and documenting all the MSGs for all of your participants. So the key to this slide is, and it's not new information, but as we all know, since it's all the only people who are going to count in this measure are those enrolled in educational or occupational skills training. The key here is that that's the trigger for the measure. So the dates they entered that education or training is very important. It's putting them in the measure and then taking them out. It's not exit based. So the first date of training is the date your individual attended the class. It's not when you registered them or planned it, or even the first date of the course, like in the catalog. It's when they went. Then the last date of training is the last date they attended their class in person, or if they were in an online class, that date. So it's not when they went back to take the final exam or ran in to get their report card or had one more meeting with the professor, dropped off something, nothing like that. It's when the last date they attended class no matter what. And the importance of that is if we don't capture very accurate start and end dates, we could perpetuate people being in the measure when they're really not. So if you don't appropriately end your training at the end of a PY, you might be on the hook an entire other program year and lacking those gains. So that's what we really, and DOL also reiterated that to us. So type 1, the MSG for EFL gain, pretty straightforward. Everyone's familiar with this. The system automatically calculates an MSG when someone takes a post-test and it increases. For type 2, I'll just point out the first 3 types of MSGs are pretty straightforward. I'll be quick about these, but this is important because secondary school diplomas or equivalents, GEDs, are a standalone type of MSG. However, prior guidance before we learned were like, where are we getting these captured? So our guidance was to go in and report your high school diplomas and GEDs as a skills progression type, but that is not the case anymore. High school diplomas and GEDs are going to be counted as soon as they are documented and added to the exit screen. In the eyes of DOL, as we report, it is looking at that field and pulling the MSGs out of there. So it's being done behind the screens, but we do need all of those secondary school diplomas, GEDs, to be added on the exit screen as they occur. So please don't wait, as you typically do when you go to system exit someone and add it then, because they might be in the measurable skills gain measure in an entire program year, a couple years before they even go to exit. So we need to have that on the exit screen so it's picked up and reported as an MSG. We can't keep documenting them as skills progression type because, first of all, it doesn't fall in the definition at all, and then we'd be getting duplicates as the system can automatically calculate them from just indicating the secondary credential. So that is our new news on how to document high school diplomas and GEDs. So type 3, again, I'll be quick on this. It's straightforward. We pick up Illinois, and it's how it should be reported. We have a space for you to document a secondary or post-secondary transcripts, and there are rules regarding these. The secondary needs to be for 1 semester, post-secondary need to be at least 12 hours to count it. But if a person or participant is part-time, and this is a very simplistic example, if they get 6 credits in the spring and they're still in training after July and they pick up another 6 credits in the fall, you get to count the post-secondary MSG for this not until the fall. So when they meet the whole number of credits. Okay, so moving on to the last 2 types of MSGs that have brought up, I think, the most discussion in Illinois for Mark and I and policy, and as well as Department of Labor and other states. So as I move into the MSGs that seem less black and white, can be left up to interpretation. I will point out that Laura and I were on a DOL peer learning call the other day, and we were chatting some questions, and then someone from DOL was like, okay, well, Illinois has done a lot of technical assistance, and a state said, yes, we don't like to touch the MSGs, and we opt not to get that in-person training from DOL because we can't take any more input on the MSGs. So when we feel like we have confusion or not in a good place with being confident about documenting MSGs, I'm just here to say that you all are probably doing exceptionally well. And as a state, Illinois, they use the words ahead of the curve. So you probably understand a lot more than a lot of other states. So that's a good thing because confusion is not a fun place to be in for performance. So anyway, here's some new, an update for the training milestone. So training milestones are actually also, when you think about them, we also think of progress reports. So Teresa Tice from DOL, every time she said training milestone, she mentioned the word progress report, and they're towards an established milestone from an employer or training provider. Rule of thumb, when you think about this type, training milestones and progress reports, where do they occur? Usually, likely, when you're going to get one of this type of MSGs, they're at a work site, OJT, WEX, WBL. Here is a piece of information that's important because we had some mixed guidance. Certificates of completion do not count as any type of skill gain. They do not count as a training milestone. OSHA, CPR, anything like that. A standalone Microsoft Office training will never count as any type of MSG. It doesn't matter if it's in a progress report. Those are not MSGs. Employability skills are not MSGs. So the goal here and what we're trying to think of, like a decision path when you're figuring out if you have a training milestone, is what constitutes satisfactory progress? Are the skills measurable? So when you set aside and you know the known factor here is what does not count, you can take your progress report and make those determinations based on increases, which is progress, but they have to be predetermined. Another thing on training milestone, and Mark touched on this a little bit when he talked about the WEX, work experiences. So for example, we all know that we have the in-school youth who are going to be in our MSGs every year, regardless if they go back into training. And the 1A and 1D who are enrolled in training, and maybe they come in close to July 1st. And what are you going to do for 2 or 3 weeks to get an MSG at that point? So one suggestion was work-based learning. So in the service matrix, it's a WBL, a job shadowing, and it's available for 1A, 1D, 1Y. So it's like it's a short-term enrollment that can provide skills gains that can be documented when a participant can obtain a satisfactory or better progress report. This is the definition, towards those established milestones. So that's just an idea of when you're like, what am I supposed to do for this MSG? This is one example that was given to us by DOL, and to go back and look at work experiences, excuse me, and work-based learning. Okay, so that was training milestone progress reports, the type 4. Now we're moving on to type 5. This MSG is called, in systems, skills progression. The key to this, it's actually skills progression or exam passage. Or progress attaining technical occupational skills that are evidenced by trade-related benchmarks. So that's the definition in the TEAGL. And we have an update for you from DOL, and it's that we did learn tests, the individual components, the tests leading up to a GED count as a skills progression exam-based type MSG. So everyone's been asking about that in the past. We all can vouch. We were told no. This is an update. As they revisited this definition, it's an exam and it's allowed and expected to be documented. So I hope everyone's happy about that, and can go back and document those GED tests. Because remember, skills progression, and what I was mentioning in the beginning, we were guiding areas to document the secondary credential, high school diploma or GED as a skills progression. And honestly, that was guidance, past guidance. But now the secondary diploma GED will be picked up when you add it to the exit. Then you get another MSG type for skills progression as someone is making progress passing those GED tests. So anyway, a rule of thumb to think about: skills progression occurs in during education in a more like classroom setting, classroom environment, while as type 4, going back, that was, if you think about it, OJT type work site. So that's one thing to think about when you're trying to differentiate which type you have. So another rule of thumb is think about, does the test or exam demonstrate to the instructor necessary skills have been attained? If it's a test like that, the answer is yes, then it's this MSG type. Skills progression continued. So types of exams might be within a registered apprenticeship program, employer required knowledge-based industry occupational competency assessments. like a completion test for a credential. A CD permit test is an example. And skills progression should also be known as exam passage type. Passing a state test to be able to obtain the CDL license equals the MSG. And the key here that has now become very clear to us, the CD, and this has been asked of us, the CDL license itself is not a skill gain. That is the credential. So there's your decision path. If you think about those two things, one is a skills progression exam passage type of MSG. The other can't be reported there too. It's the flat out credential. Again, certificates of completion, OSHA, CPR, software skills, food safety do not count. They never count as any MSG. So please share that information because I know it was guided in the past that these did seem to fit under the definition, but they do not. So that's very important. And we want to get this information disseminated. Okay, a few slides. I'll be quick about these. It's basically to include for all of your reference to take this to your staff. These are just some things that we thought were key to Teresa's presentation for us. MSGs are predetermined. They must be pre-established and predetermined in ISSs and IEPs before you go about documenting all of the different types. This isn't a TEAGL, so you can't just have random MSGs happen. Someone comes in and talks to you and be like, oh, that sounds like an MSG. It needs to be predetermined. To help provide all different types, MSGs should be set as goals that address all skill deficiencies of individuals, and they should be documented throughout the year as they are earned, so not just one. And then programs should not wait to document MSGs until the end of a quarter or end of the PY as you track them. And this just helps us track where we are and gauge that throughout the year. Here's another rule of thumb. The key to figuring out if you have an MSG or what type it is the documentation that you're using. So one thing that we were told to ask that makes sense, that helps. Ask yourself, what document will be provided or obtained to indicate the participant has met the requirements of the type of MSG? Then if you can tie the document to a type of MSG, there you go. Like the transcripts are easy. That's very clear cut. But now what we're trying to make clear is that like a progress report would be your training milestone. And if you have an exam passage, then there you go. That's the fifth type of MSG. So it's your source document. And we were directed to that source documentation quite a bit when we asked questions too. Okay, MSGs, we were reminded to be more aware of the importance of MSGs as a performance indicator, because MSGs demonstrate value of training programs for the participants. And MSGs are being evaluated by Congress, because if you have someone enrolled in education and training and even work-based learn or OJTs, and they're not getting any MSGs, or you're just not documenting them, it doesn't reflect kindly on or speak very well about the training program or education or OJT they're in if they can't even come up with milestones along the way. So another important point on this, programs should be documenting all 5 types of MSGs across programs. They shouldn't just be focusing on one, like, okay, we have this cohort and we know they're going to be in high school, so let's just stick straight with those high school transcripts and we know we got them. And just like everyone in that you have in certain classes, like CDLs, okay, let's just focus on these and let's just stick with the, the skills progression, exam passage, MSG, this cohort, and we're covered. We should really try to be documenting all the different types as much as possible. She did mention that lack of documenting variety of MSGs could indicate a need for revision of service delivery models. So just let us know, let them know that you're doing everything correctly by documenting them. A few more points. All types of gains apply for all individuals qualifying for the MSG performance measure. Again, there's no rule that requires a gain type be tied to a WIOA-funded education or training program. If you had someone who was in an occupational skills training program for 3 months and they're in the measure for PY23, but then they're being really successful in a WEX, that is fine. You can use those training milestones and progress reports, even though it was their nursing training that put them in your measure. So that's something we got really hammered out and clarified. So for an example, this is an out-of-school youth who qualified due to their occupational skills training, but they were in a WEX. It's completely allowable to document the training milestone. And then also, as expected, if a gain type for their transcripts is obtained along the way, you should document that as well. And I think everyone is doing that. Okay, so this is another reference slide. I don't intend to go over all of these in details. So the source document I was referring to, when in doubt, you can figure out the document that you need in the file to prove or support the MSGs you're reporting in that Teagle 2319 change 1. Okay, so I should remind you, and Mark, step in anytime, if you want to go ahead and ask any questions or put any points or things you're thinking of in the chat, that would be great. And I should be able to share everything on credentials quickly, and then it will open up to questions, if that's fine with everyone. I do see the chat, so if you would like, I could stop right now and answer any questions. But either way, or just keep going.
Yeah, just one clarification.
Mm-hmm.
For there was that skills, was it skills progression? Where
Type 5.
Yeah, so certificate of completion. So like for OSHA, CPR, those don't necessarily lead to like occupational, jobs, right? Employment, but by in itself. But so the clarification I'm asking for is if a person, let's say, completed an actual training program like CDL training, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Completed it, but they didn't get the license. Okay. But they completed the training. That certificate of completion that the training institution issues saying they completed the training in itself, that would not be able to be used as an MSG.
And not unless they took a test. Now,
Okay.
there's a difference, and they provided us a nice slide on clarification between the differences in certificates of completion than the occupational certification.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? So it's based on, was there an exam that had to be passed to prove completion of the course and maybe obtain a certificate. And
Okay.
it could have been the occupational certificate in cases.
Okay. And then, so then for training number, or the milestone number 4,
Mm-hmm.
we would not be able to use the certificate of completion for that.
No, the only certificate of completion that counts is for a registered apprenticeship, because that is the certification.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. Anything else I'm missing? I'm looking, I pulled up the chat on another screen. Oh, okay. I don't think I'm missing any. Okay. completions of OJTs count. I should have said that. I'm sorry. So when you get back to thinking about the training milestone progress report, MSG type number 4, where OJT, when I said, think about where it occurs, a work site, OJT, completion of an OJT. See, that's just not a certificate like a Microsoft. That is an indication that progress occurred and falls under that definition for type 4. But I don't think that's a certificate. It would probably be based on a progress report or an evaluation from the employer anyway. But I did mean to mention that. Okay, so moving on to credentials for the adult, dislocated worker, and youth credential attainment rates. A lot of these slides are informational for your reference, so I'll move through quickly. Credentials must be occupationally specific and industry recognized. Credentials can be academic, so secondary or post-secondary, technical or occupational. Okay, so they broke it down to 2 types for us: secondary, which is academic, type 2, post-secondary, which can be academic, occupational, like an occupational skills training, or technical and vocational. So this measure counts and gives you credit for, you get positives for both secondary school diplomas or GED and any post-secondary credentials. The rule here is that your credentials need to be obtained during the program or within 1 year following exit. And here's the caveat, or the special rule, as we call it, for the credential. So if you have a participant that only has their secondary school diploma or equivalent, you still need to document that they're employed or enrolled in an education or training program leading to their post-secondary credential, or get a credential itself to count as a positive. So secondary school diplomas and equivalents are just your first step to counting in this performance measure as a positive. So again, there's caveats when it comes to who's in it. Adult and dislocated workers are in the measure if they're in any education or training. But unlike the measurable skills gain, OJT and customized training services aren't triggers. They don't qualify people for credentials because they don't produce credentials. So for youth, again, all in-school youth are included in your credential measure, no matter what, and no matter the type of training or education they continue through participation. Certain out-of-school youth are included, and it's those who are in occupational skills training or in secondary or post-secondary education, and those youth elements while in the program. So all of those youth elements that flag them or qualify them are flagged in the matrix clearly in the right-hand columns. So this is just the calculation. It's the percentage of participants enrolled in education or training, but not OJT and customized, who attain recognized post-secondary credentials or secondary school diploma, and they have a year after exit to do this. Okay, here is the list of the types of credentials, and this is straight out of the Teagle, and nothing has changed about this. It is the way they're typed and categorized. This secondary school diploma, when you enter in a system a high school diploma or GED and select that type and add it to the exit, this is what I'm talking about. This one right here. That is what we look at. Oh, sorry. That is what is looked at for their first step in meeting the credential measure. That is also what is looked at for the MSG type for this. So when you report a secondary school diploma, sorry to go back to the MSG, you're reporting an MSG, and you're also meeting that first criteria. Then we have the associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, the licensures, specific, occupationally specific certificates or certification. I think this is what you're talking about, Paul. Registered apprenticeship and career technical education certificates. So those are different than certificates of completion. Other recognized certificates of industry occupational skills completion. So those are the different types. And again, when you look at this type of occupational licensures, those are credentials, but they're not necessarily MSGs. The license is the credential. Okay, so these are examples of credentials that meet the definition, what we're looking for. CNA license. So this is an example of your occupational licensure. Automotive service excellence certifications. This is your occupational certification. So again, as we always get into detail, what counts, what counts, what counts, we are told again and again, states must follow the definition. DOL, it's not even feasible for them to rule on each individual credential. So that's why there's so much documentation and references on these, and we will give them to you. There's decision paths and logic charts. So it's going to be up to us to make some of these researched decisions. Examples of common certificates that do not meet the credential definition. These have been around for a long time. I think we're all familiar now with your OSHA 10-hour courses. Anything work or career readiness, employability skills do not count for credentials. We were given an example of completion of an assistive technology training program like screen reading software, those courses, and then of course not basic computer or soft skills will never count. And then anything like completion of an orientation, those things will never count for a credential. Okay, so in this PowerPoint is this, I call it a logic chart or decision path to go through to justify or support your thoughts. Do you have an acceptable credential? Is it allowable for your programs to document that as the credential and expect to receive credit as a positive in your performance reporting? Caroline, I am not familiar enough with the NCRC work keys to answer that, but it's a good example and question to go along with these slides. And I wonder if Laura or Mark or anyone else is familiar with the NCRC is. Here is the credential attainment decision tree tool. The link is at the bottom of this slide, and it's extremely helpful because sometimes I even get caught up in over analyzing what seems on the face to be a credential, but truly there are very stringent rules on what can count. So it's the credential attainment decision tree, and I think Laura sent this to me years ago, and it's very, very helpful. Okay, so this is just a quick question or little quiz to try to highlight something and make sure that all the programs are aware of this and we're getting all the credit we possibly can for credentials. So you can read this scenario, and I'll read it along with you. An in-school youth, ISY, earned a high school diploma during participation in their WIOA program. He was enrolled in Title I funded youth elements, and which included an entrepreneurial skills training and CDL courses in the classroom. At exit, he had already dropped out of a CDL training that was being paid for by WIOA, and he was not employed, not working when he exited. During the same quarter he exited in, he enrolled himself in an RN program and was paying for the program with his own funds and through student loans. within the first 3 months or so, he received a CNA, which was a prerequisite he paid for and needed to get into his end goal of the RN program. That was all on his own. So in this case, our program's allowed to report the non-WIOA training related CAN or CNA license. Even though he did that on his own, WIOA touched him and helped him for the time that he was in the program, but according to the exit, he exited as, other services completed maybe. So is it okay to go ahead and report that CNA license as a credential? Because he's going to be in your measure, you need a credential. So is that okay? You can chat it or just answer. And then what are his outcomes in the youth credential performance measure? If he can or can't, if you can or can't count his CNA. Okay, so the answer to our program's allowed to report any non-WIOA training related credentials, yes. So please do report those. I know it seems that maybe DOL doesn't, there's so many rules about what else you can report. But please, yes, when you realize that someone has a credential and they're already in the measure, they have a year after exit. So please document and count them all. It's important. Even though WIOA didn't fund, yes, I know it was auto-correcting all my CNAs to CAN, David, but thank you. So please do report all of them, because the thing is, even though he failed out of his CDL training, he was your participant. You were helping him. You were working with him. There were career services happening. He had an entrepreneurial training. One of those maybe spurred him to go on his own and become successful in his CNA and RN related training. So that is how it is tied to WIOA post-exit. And so, of course, since he was in the measure due to his in-school youth status, on top of that is CDL, he's positives, all positives for the credential performance measure rate. So with that said, here is another nice slide. DOL, actually, this is a lot of DOL's material. Provide us with this overall guidance for credential, that awesome decision pathway and decision tree tool. They're all on here. And then there's Teagles too, that we're probably all aware of. The 2519 is just on credentials. And then of course that source doc. 2319 change 1, and it's attachment 2, and you can pull it up in Excel. So with that said, I can take any extra questions, or if anyone has any comments, or Mark or Laura, if you have anything to add. But that is all I have for today. Thank you very, very much for attending.
Thanks, Paula. Yeah, if anyone has, I didn't see any additional questions. You seem to have answered all that were put in the chat. So if anyone has any additional questions, they want to open up their microphone or post it in the chat. Christy, yeah, let me find my text. This has been recorded and it'll be posted out there for everyone, along with all of our WIOA Wednesday webinars. So just a second, I'll repost this. There you go. So everyone will be able to see it. It takes 2 to 3 days to build the recording I think they come out as a YouTube type recorded session, and then get those uploaded. And we will start recording these moving forward. We had enough requests in our last office hours that we decided we're going to go ahead and record and post all of these. Some of you aren't able to join all the time. Again, Francisco, it'll take 3 to 4 days, maybe at the most, to get those posted. So check back Friday or early next week to see that. A couple as we're waiting for, well, here, Paula. So the question is, do the college FERPA requirements we are having trouble getting transcripts and diplomas from community college if the student is non-responsive to our request for documentation. So I guess this is to everyone else. How are other areas in the state dealing with this issue when they aren't able to get the documentation? So I'll let all of you answer that question. Anyone wants to volunteer their process? We may have to revisit this, Christine. It doesn't look like anyone's on the line today has anything to share.
I have
Yeah, go ahead,
something to
Paul.
say. So for us, we use vouchers. I don't know how many other areas use vouchers, but we use vouchers, electronic vouchers that we write to, to pay for tuition and so forth. But as part of that voucher process, it's on the actual voucher that it's almost like a contract agreement. And so in accepting that voucher, they would release information related to the training to us. And so when a participant gets enrolled into a training program at whatever college or training institution, we can ask for their progress reports or their grades, and we should be able to get that because of that disclaimer on the actual voucher that we send for payment.
Thank you.
I actually have a follow-up question. This is LaDonna from LW11. And DOL just released that TEGL 1023 on reducing the administrative burden to clients. I was just going to ask, how does that affect performance? Like they were saying, if we can't get documentation, but we see the documentation and case managers can put a case note in that they saw it, would that still be acceptable for performance?
The answer is I'm not sure, and I will go back and look at the source documentation too for data validation to see if.
Yeah, that's a good reference, and one of the things I was thinking when Christine first posed that to LaDonna. But we can't mandate it, and I'll have to look at that TEGL as well. I know I wasn't available when they did a webinar on that, and I've not been able to go back and look at that, but maybe it was answered in a DOL webinar that was presented a few weeks ago on Workforce GPS. It should be out there by now, but I know we do have some questions from that TEGL that we still need answered. But in general, the kind of the premise of that TEGL is don't mandate too much that it becomes a burden, unless it's something that's needed kind of in the future, meaning like eligibility documents. If they can't show you the driver's license now, accept that they said they have one, ask them for it, but make sure they realize if they don't have that driver's license, they aren't going to be able to get employed in many occupations. So that's where it's really needed. And DOL has indicated that's where our career planners, case managers should be working with that individual to make sure they do get it. If they're planning on going to an occupation that requires that. So I think we've got a little bit more research to do, and we can provide that as a future update as we have a better understanding. I know we mentioned this, and it might have been in the last office hours after I'd gone to a convening in Washington, D.C., and they were harping on this at that time, pre the TEGL being issued, that you just kind of have to balance that source documentation versus self-attestation of those things. And probably if you're doing it one way or the other all the time, it's probably not following the guidance. But if you find a place in between that you can justify each and every instance of when you accept self-attestation and when you don't, then you should be in good position. You just need to be able to justify why you're making that decision, is what they kind of said back in September. And we're actually have another follow-up to that convening in April that Paul and I will be joining it. They're doing a virtual session as a follow-up. A lot of data elements they talked about then, but also got into some of the performance. So I think, and it brings me to a point where our next office hours will be May 8th. Please mark your calendars. It'll be at the same time, 1 to 2:30. That's a week earlier than we generally do that. But we have some conflicts on that third week, that third Wednesday of the month. So in talking with our technical assistance team, local technical assistance team, they asked we do it earlier than later. And so we're going to be doing that on, let me make sure that's the right date. Yeah, May 8th, got it down here. So after we get through that virtual reconvening with DOL, which is April 17th, after we get through the WIOA summit, I think we might have some more updates for you at the May performance office hours. We'll also certainly touch on negotiations again. At that time, we might have a better sense of our actual schedule and timeline. We've got a draft timeline, but we're still working on some of the policy, working with Andy and Brian on the negotiation tool. And hopefully we'll actually have our negotiation done, and we'll know and be able to share with you what we negotiated at the state level by that May 8th. That may be the following week that we have it, but we'll get that out to you as soon as we have it, so you have a sense of how each of the LWIAs, each of the boards can assist the state in meeting those goals we end up negotiating. The other key date I wanted to share is a couple LWIAs, their representatives in LWIAs 1 and 13 are going to present a webinar on April 17th from 10 to 11:30. Mark your calendar for that. We should get the description and registration for that out, if not Monday, the following Monday, so you have at least a couple weeks notice of when that will occur. But if you'll mark your calendars, they're going to talk about some of their intake processes, some of their enrolling processes, and so what they think are helping them succeed, helping them in serving participants in the best way they can. So we look forward to that. That's kind of what we've been asking for and what we'd like to do moving forward, either as part of these office hours or as a separate webinar, as is going to occur in April. All of you, we talk about this a lot, would also like to have all of you at some point in time bring forward to share with everyone else something you really are proud of, something you've done that helps your operations run more efficiently, effectively, maybe get things done more timely, maybe helps you achieve success in performance, or at least increase it if you've been performing successfully for a period of time and you're seeing additional increases. So keep that in mind. We're always looking for all of you to share your stories, and we want you to want to highlight them. So again, key dates: April 17th for a webinar, 10 to 11:30, and May 8th, next quarterly performance office hours from 1 to 2:30. Yeah, this is great. Caroline's question in response to Christine, I think that's great, as some people have given how they've handled this. Maybe Christine, you might need to and want to talk to some of these other LWIAs to try and figure out how they made it work, that they were able to get their providers to share the information. Caroline's got a recommendation there to talk to them. So I think this is great that we're hearing from all of you and sharing your stories with the other LWIAs. Any final questions or comments that you would like Paul and I to respond to before we sign off for the day? Okay, not hearing any. We want to thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at one of the upcoming virtual or in-person sessions that we discussed over the next couple months. Have a great day.